I get to see thousands of people who are on the streets or in Vegas. What's unique is we have about 600 miles of tunnels through they're flood tunnels because Vegas is in a valley. And in those tunnels, it provides, it's cooler because you're in the shade. But more importantly, it's an open place to be able to use drugs with impunity. And every time I've been in the tunnels, and I've been in the tunnels hundreds of times, including I took A&E's intervention team. They did 2 episodes with me doing interventions in the tunnel. So I've had camera crews in the tunnels before. I successfully brought a girl she was an early opposition defiant disorder, meth and heroin user who'd been down there 3 years. And doing interventions, usually you have some kind of leverage. Like when I do an intervention on a doctor, I'm like, you could use your medical license. You could lose your medical license. Or I'm doing an intervention on a kid, I say, your mom's not gonna help you anymore. But a lady in the tunnel, I had almost no leverage, but even her, she recently took 2 years clean. We were able to do a successful intervention on camera and help get her well.
That's fantastic. I love to hear it. What do you think brings people into the tunnels in specific?
Well, I used to use drugs and I loved it. And I used to party a lot. And I understand the feeling that to be able to shoot heroin or to be able to smoke methamphetamine in the real world, it's annoying. There's too many people looking. It's too easy to get arrested. If you slink down into a dark tunnel where there's other drug users, it's a place you could finally use with impunity. So it's really it's like a different world. Both the market for drugs and the ability to use drugs. In the hundreds of times I've been in the tunnels, I've never not seen a person injecting while I was there. So if we go for a walk, I'm expecting to be able to the drug use is so prolific in these tunnels. That's really what it is. It's a place. There's also rumors because the police radios don't work in the tunnels. So the tunnel people, they believe that the police can't even get them. So it's a place you could finally sit back and take a hit of meth like you really want, or have some fentanyl like your body craves, and not worry about being hassled.
That makes sense, yeah.
It does make sense, but it's also terrible. It's inappropriate. It should not be happening in a first world country.
What are the risks of living in the tunnels?
Well, I've brought several people out of the tunnels personally who were in there for 10 years. And the sores they have on their body, the fact that the tunnels, a lot of our sewers go into them. So it's like sewage water on there. There's no electricity. There's no running water. It's really, from a hygiene standpoint, it's definitely a toxic place to live. And then if you add the rampant drug use, it's also not safe. And something that particularly breaks my heart, and I try to say this and not cry, but I've treated hundreds and hundreds of women, and every single one was raped multiple times while they're in the tunnels in this place with there's no law. So, and not just females. So the crime that goes in these tunnels and the drug use and the unhealthiness, I believe they should put rebar up and they should seal them off. We should not allow a place like this to exist in our city.
100%. I was hearing too that there's flooding that happens through those tunnels.
And every year or every few years we lose somebody. I send crews and I personally go out and warn people just before the big rains. And it's interesting because they'll take their camps out of the tunnel and be right outside the tunnel on the shores, and they slowly move them up as the waters get higher and higher. But I don't know if you ever took a really big fentanyl hit, but you could nod out for 3-4 hours. So I'm not surprised that people lose their life due to drowning, but I assure you way more people die from overdose and from murder in the tunnels.
100%. I mean, it's heartbreaking to think about because this water comes fast, right? Like this flash floods and things like that. Is there also, people were talking about leveling of water? I don't know if it was from the dam or something. Is there water that comes through that's not from the rain?
Just the sewers.
Just the sewer?
Yeah,
Okay.
but look around. We're in a big valley, so when the water falls from the sky on 50 square miles and then it all runs down to one channel, there's a tremendous amount of water running through here. It's astounding, and I'm sure you jump on YouTube, you could see some of the times that our tunnels are roaring.
Have you seen it?
I've seen it personally. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Like the tunnel's full, water on a high pressure basis jamming through it.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
nuts.
It is nuts.
So then, because people have stuff in there, all that, where does it go?
Most of the time they lose their stuff. And it's interesting talking to people who've been there for a decade or been there for a long time. Often they'll build things on stilts or on a couple shopping carts that they drag down there to elevate it. But there's still a flood several times a year that takes everything. And they kind of go through a grief and loss of losing all their stuff and just getting out with usually their drug-using paraphernalia and, certainly not their ID, because we treat tons of them coming and almost none of them have an ID. They basically have nothing on them.
What's with that? Because if they don't have an ID on them, say they get washed away, how do they identify who these people are if they've died?
Well, I'll let the coroner address, the use of dental records and DNA. But I don't know of a lot of unidentified people. They do find those unidentified folks in the lake, which is from our Vegas's deeper history. But in the tunnels, they've been able to identify everyone.
Can you talk about that deeper history? What are you talking about there?
Oh, Vegas used to be a mob-run town, and there's many people who were found in the lake. And as the lake levels are going down, every few years we find another body in a barrel or with some cement shoes. That was like a safe place to dispose bodies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Wow. But where do the tunnels wash out at? Do they wash?
To Lake Mead.
So the tunnels wash to Lake Mead.
Correct.
So they're trash, and potentially anybody that dies from flooding gets pushed into Lake Mead?
Tons of trash. And I think it's interesting that they're, the water district, they're testing the amount of fentanyl, the amount of benzodiazepines that are actually in the water coming out of Vegas, because there's both distinguishable amounts of those two substances in the water coming through the tunnels, in addition to like fecal matter and whatever other toxic substances we don't want to talk about.
Wow. So if somebody jumped in that river of tunnel water and got a schluck of it, they could get some fentanyl in them, is
Yes,
what you're saying?
Yes, they could.
Yikes.
Yeah, and the amount of, usually I'll have a nurse or a doctor, the amount of sores on their feet, they'll get trench foot because they're walking in that bad water all the time. So again, I do not think anyone should be living in the tunnels underneath Las Vegas.
We just met somebody yesterday deep in the tunnels, and he was scared because he thought we were the police.
Right.
And so he was hiding in the water, completely submerged.
Oh, wow.
And then he goes, oh, like I go, hey, we're just media, and he goes, he like gets up, cuts his hand real bad, man. And he's bleeding everywhere. We're giving him gauze. We take him to the urgent care and everything. But he didn't want to go, man.
Right.
How many people that are living in these tunnels don't want to get medical care for some of these things they're experiencing?
Almost all of them. Whenever I go with a team, we use just get one. We do interventions. We try to just get one out, and we are successful in getting one out periodically. But by far, most of them don't want to go, and they're in hiding. Many of them have warrants. So it's kind of an outlaw land that you could live below our city, and it's astounding. One of the tunnels I regularly go to, they call it the Art Gallery, but there's a grate you could look up and see Caesar's Palace while you're down in the tunnel. So there's this like counterculture, no man's land, and then right up above you see millionaires and billionaires and certainly billion-dollar resorts. And the juxtaposition, it's an indication of something that just isn't right in this city.
Yeah. What do you feel about that? Do you feel like this is just emotionally for you to see that juxtaposition, all these people living in the tunnels? Like, how do you go through this day to day?
Well, I'm one of the few brave enough people to take my wealth and focus it on trying to bring about change. So I've been down, I've been providing treatment to people for, it'll be 20 years. And I've helped more than 10,000 people get off drugs. So to me, I'm doing everything I can to make a difference. And I certainly have my lane, and I recognize there's other things that need to be done. But what I'm doing is providing access to behavioral health care to anyone who needs it. And I don't discriminate based on if you're out of state and you don't have a Medicaid card. Again, we figure out how to help every person who walks in here if they walk in that golden door that you walked in. And you probably saw, we're cranking through people. So we have lots of people in our lobby.
Man, much respect to what you do.
Well, thank you.
This is big time, and I hope you can keep going with this. I hope this can
there's
help.
no question.
Yeah.
We're keep going. We're doing nothing but growing. But I'm a staunch conservative, and I believe a lot of the government's desire to help the problem ends up exacerbating it and making it worse. And I have a lot of clients who come in who say, I can't work. I'm on a pension or I'm on a disability, and if I do, I jeopardize that. So I'm so bored, I can't work, I got nothing to do. Drugs just made sense. I used drugs for a while and then I couldn't be above land. So to me, some of these government programs are actually driving these folks underground. So as a American with some Yankee ingenuity, I just said, what could I help do to help solve the problem? And what I could do is have a clinic to help thousands of people get access to care. So I'm trying to do my part. And I hope you and your viewers, I hope they try to figure out what their part is and they try to help too.
I really respect it, man, because I do think it shouldn't be the government. It should be
Definitely not.
It should be businesses and nonprofits started by people, because it's much more effective, in my opinion, than government assistance.
We do homeless outreach, and I have 10 people who go out and regularly do outreach. When I talk to the cities or the county's teams, they say it takes 17 interventions to get a person come into treatment. And what I say is that it's August. If there's a guy out there shooting fentanyl and it's 114 degrees, it's an emergency, and I don't want to take 10 visits or 20 visits. That person should get in the van right now and they should come get help. I don't want to hear about I gave out water bottles or I gave out food to them. I want to hear about getting these people out of this unsafe, or I should say, this cruel and unusual place. Because I don't know if you saw the Grants Pass case, which just came up. The Supreme Court said that municipalities, based on these two folks who were in Grants Pass, in the city of Grants Pass, they said it was cruel and unusual for them to incarcerate them as opposed to letting them camp. And I think the exact opposite. I think it's cruel and unusual to let people stay outside in Phoenix or in Las Vegas and camp in our streets, making our parks unsafe for our kids, bringing down the whole brand of our city. Because when you come and visit our city, you see Las Vegas as a place with vagrancy and panhandling and the smell of marijuana. It wasn't like that 20 years ago. We need to have, everyone needs to be above ground. And if you have a drug addiction or a mental illness, you should not be in the streets. You should be in the social safety net with some of the nonprofits like Vegas Strong are getting help.
What do you think? Because it seems like there's been a massive increase in the amount of people that want to live on the streets. What are, I know there's a lot of reasons that go into it, but what are the reasons you think that are making more people homeless?
The lie that they tell you is that it's an affordable housing problem. And I want to tell you that's a lie. I talk to all of them. I'm down here every day, and I've been down here, providing treatment for over a decade. If people are getting pushed out by affordable housing, you're right. They're falling back on the family system. They're going to their friend's couch. They're sorting out something. And I'm not denying that there's an affordable housing challenge. All I'm telling you is that's not the reason there's 7,900 unhoused in Vegas. Those people who are unhoused in Vegas are because of a substance use disorder or a mental illness. That's the two reasons. Now, that's 90% of it. So by addressing that with a evidence-based behavioral health care, we're able to address 90% of the problem. And to me, it's just a matter of time of continuing to do outreach, provide treatment, and help people become self-supporting again.
And why do you think that substance abuse and mental health problems are just on the rise right now, more than ever?
It's a perfect storm. I'm sure you realize we're in the fourth wave of an opioid crisis, where we had the oxycodone crisis that came in, and then we had some heroin come in underneath it in the second wave, and then we had fentanyl come in the third wave. Now we have fentanyl with methamphetamines and xylazine in this fourth wave. So big pharma, some of this is on big pharma. A lot of this is on the cartels, which are supplying and creating a demand for their product. But mixed within this, we're still dealing with the ripple effects of the failure of the state's mental health system, where with deinstitutionalization, they closed all the inpatient facilities, moved it to outpatient, and then over about 20 years, state governments regularly ratcheted back budgets for mental health services on an outpatient basis because their constituents don't vote. They weren't particularly good at advocating for themselves. So they've now decimated the mental health system. So it's a decimated mental health system. It's the big pharma taking advantage, selling Oxycontin and other opiates. And then, the onslaught of heroin and fentanyl from Mexico. And I don't want to miss meth, because at that same time, I sat on the governor's meth task force and worked with the pharmacy board to get pseudoephedrine off our streets over a decade ago. And they used to have meth labs all around Las Vegas, and I saw them. And people would set up little trailers outside of Vegas because you could cook smelly meth, and it didn't bother people if you drive 50 miles in any direction. But by limiting access to supply of pseudoephedrine, we were able to essentially bring it to a drip. However, that's been backfilled with Mexican super labs that are now shipping methamphetamine that almost all of it now has fentanyl within it. That's an important distinction, because methamphetamine is psychologically addicting, but not physiologically addicting. Fentanyl is physiologically addicting. So you could use some methamphetamine once a week. You can't use fentanyl once a week. You physiologically need it every single day. So the fact that in this fourth wave, they're integrating the two, it's going to materially drive up numbers because their clients need the product every day.
Man, it's crazy. We were hearing prices. People were telling us 50 cents.
Yeah.
They could get it $3. That's so cheap.
$1 for one hit of fentanyl.
That's crazy to me. You know?
Which would last you all day. At first. As you built up tolerance, you'd need more.
Man. And so one of the last things, with people that are in the tunnels, are you guys the only people warning folks when the floods come?
No, there's some other nonprofits, some good and some bad.
The city doesn't warn them, though.
The city won't go into the tunnels, but they go near. And most of the people in the tunnel, they got to go out and panhandle, or they got to go out and steal periodically to get supplies. So, I believe the city, most of the folks in the tunnels, they're getting reached, by some of the outside providers. And then there's 3 or 4 providers like Vegas Stronger that physically go and walk through the tunnels, have relationships. I can't walk through a tunnel without everybody recognizing me. So, which, like with you, at first they're afraid it's a cop, but once they recognize you're Vegas Stronger, they're like, do you have some Narcan for me? And I'll reach down and be like, yes, here's some Narcan. You should have this handy, because if one of your brothers ends up overdosing, you shoot this into their nose and they could be revived. I've revived about 15 people with CPR, which is something I did not expect to do when I got into this field. And my staff has done about 20. And many times they've called me and they say, Dave, there's a guy asleep in the parking lot. I don't understand. And I'm like, Narcan him right now. And they're like, oh, okay. So my staff has Narcan, folks. I personally haven't, although I do Narcan trainings regularly to my staff, and we distribute lots of this. Although I'm a little wary about harm reduction. Let me do this a little bit. Harm reduction is another well-intentioned government program. Let's give Narcan freely to everyone so they don't overdose. Most of the camps you're going to find of the homeless folks, they're going to have some of this, and they know it's so we could use with impunity, and we could just Narcan if we use too much. There's a needle exchange over on Jones and Charleston. They hand out over 1 million needles a year, and they're like, aren't we good? We're increasing our numbers. And I ask, how many needles do you have to hand out before you're enabling and you're actually part of the problem? So I'm not opposed to harm reduction. I'm opposed to recognizing that's not the end all. Harm reduction needs to be a conduit to get people into treatment to help get them well, not a means to itself.
You nailed that. Can you let me know, is there just a quick summary once again of Vegas Stronger, where people can find you and how they can help?
Thank you. Vegas Stronger is an integrated behavioral health clinic which provides treatments to any humans who walk in. We're at 916 North Main Street, right in the corridor of hope. We have a website, vegasstronger.org, as well as we're on all socials. And if you or your loved one is struggling with a substance use disorder, you could call us and we will help you.
Man, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you to our Patreon supporters for making these interviews possible.